so that I may whisper to you my most precious secret, my most secret prayer, my most prayerful desire. You are the object of all my prayers, all my searching. I seek nothing except you, truly only you. What could I seek from you that would not separate me from you? Should I seek to be Lord over a few stars, instead of reigning as Lord with you over all the stars? Should I seek to be first among men? How shameful it would be for me when you would seat me at the last place at your table. Should I seek for millions of human mouths to praise me? How horrible it would be for me when all those mouths are filled with earth. Should I seek to be surrounded by the most precious objects from the entire world? How humiliating it would be for me for those objects to outlast me and be glistening, even as earth and darkness fills my eyes. Should I seek for you not to separate me from my friends? Ah, separate me, O Lord. Separate me from my friends as soon as possible, because they are the thickest wall between you and me. Why should we pray, say my neighbors, when God does not hear our prayers? But I say to them, your prayer is not prayer, but peddling merchandise. You do not pray to God to give you God, but Satan. Therefore, the wisdom of heaven does not accept the prayers from your tongue. Why should we pray, grumble my neighbors, when God knows what we need beforehand? But I sadly answer them, that is true, God knows that you need nothing except Him alone. At the door of your soul, He is waiting to come in. Through prayer, the doors are open for the entrance of the majestic King. Does not one of you say to the other at your door, please enter? God does not seek glory for Himself, but for you. All the worlds in the universe can add nothing to His glory, much less can you. Your prayer is a glorification of you, not of God. Fullness and mercy are to be found in Him. All the good words that you direct to Him in prayer return to you twofold. O my illustrious King and my God, to you alone I bow down and pray. Flood into me as a raging stream into thirsty sand. Just flood me with yourself, life-giving water. Then grass will grow easily in the sand, and white lambs will graze in the grass. Just flood into my parched soul my life and my salvation. From Prayers by the Lake, by St. Nikolai Velimirovich.
The ancient faith for the modern world. This is Ancient Faith Radio.
Welcome to Healthy Minds, Healthy Souls with your hosts, Father Nicholas and Dr. Roxanne Lowe, where we will connect our Orthodox faith to day-to-day living in relationship to our family, our work, and our view of ourselves. Father Nicholas is the priest at St. John the Divine Greek Orthodox Church in Jacksonville, and Dr. Roxanne is a licensed clinical psychologist who uses her extensive training in private practice. Your questions are welcome by calling 855-237-2346. That's 855-237-2346. Here now is Father Nicholas and Dr. Roxanne.
Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to Healthy Minds, Healthy Souls. We are so delighted that you're joining us on this Tuesday evening. My name is Father Nicholas Lowe, and I am an Orthodox Christian priest and joined by my wife and co-host, Dr. Roxanne Lowe, a clinical psychologist, and together we serve the beautiful community of St. John the Divine Greek Orthodox Church right here in Jacksonville, Florida. And we've teamed up together to do a show, Healthy Minds, Healthy Souls, that merges faith and psychology to give you some guiding principles in your life, in your walk of faith. We really feel so passionately about practical Christianity, friends, because we think that so often we can hear a great message, we can experience a tremendous liturgy on a Sunday morning, But where we struggle is the liturgy after the liturgy, is making our faith practical and relevant, and more importantly, applying it into our everyday life. That's what we hope that Healthy Minds, Healthy Souls will do for you. You can find out more about what we're doing as a church by going to visit our church's website at saintonthedivine.com. Or you can also visit our website, Roxanne and I, our website at thelows.com. We also invite you to join our social media platforms. You can find them on at Twitter and Instagram as well as Facebook, all under the headings of The Lows. And recently, Roxanne and I started to share these daily inspirational messages. And I don't know about you, but I know that Roxanne and I love to get these just encouraging words. We get them from other churches and from other priests that are just people that inspire us. Just daily words of encouragement. And so we began doing the same thing recently. And if you're interested in receiving our daily inspirational messages, simply go to our website at thelows.com. That's last name is kind of spelled a little bit uniquely. It's LOUHS.com, and click on the subscribe button. All they're going to ask you for is your email address, and then we'll send you those daily inspirational messages. And we also want to remind you about our brand new book that came out a couple of months ago, published right here at Ancient Faith, called Renewing You, a Priest, a Psychologist, and a Plan. We've heard already so many great responses from this book, and it's a 5-star rated book, both on Amazon as well as here at Ancient Faith. And we just encourage you that if you are looking for some renewal in your life, renewal in your marriage, renewal in your walk of faith, then consider looking and purchasing this book. All of the proceeds of this book are going towards outreach ministries that are very passionate to Roxanne and myself. And I also want to invite all of you, many of you have probably already seen this advertisement, but Ancient Faith recently asked us to lead a Renewing Your Marriage retreat, which will take place on Saturday, February 13th. That's Saturday, February 13th. It is all about just giving you some tools to really just experience a greater love for your spouse, a greater love for God, and really taking your relationship to a level that maybe it's not that you haven't really experienced in a long time. So we encourage you. It's called Renewing Your Marriage, Saturday, February 13th. It's going to be a virtual or a Zoom type retreat. You can find out all about it by going to ancientfaith.com/events. Or to register, you can also call 1-800-967-7377. That's 1-800-967-7377. And finally, we just invite you to join the conversation tonight. We've got an amazing topic. It's a topic that many people have been asking us to talk about for a while. And so tonight we dedicate it to talking about it. We want you to join the conversation by calling the number at 1-855-237-2346. That's 1-855-237-2346. Or you can email us at ask@ancientfaith.com. That's ask@ancientfaith.com. And finally, if you're listening online on our social media accounts or on Ancient Faith's social media platforms, please, we encourage you, you can send a question in the comment line, and the producer of our show will be checking that as well as we will throughout the show. So today we want to talk about a topic that is really passionate to us, an area that, to be honest with you, we've struggled with quite often. And it's something that we hear, as I mentioned earlier, time and time again. And we're calling this show Catching Your Breath. Catching Your Breath. Isn't life just so busy, Roxanne? You know, for many of us, even though many of us are confined to our homes during this pandemic, we can still feel like we are running. Like we're constantly running to get this job done, running to go to the grocery store, running to prepare dinner, or running to help with our kids' schoolwork. For many of us, we can feel like we're constantly running.
The demands never stop. I mean, that's exactly it. It's the notion of the to-do list that once you cross off every item, you find that there's just 10 more. And it sort of, life is an ever-evolving to-do list that really never stops until we decide to stop.
Well, you know, and that's interesting. The Bible actually tells us that we are called to run the race. And that's so true. But God never intended us to not enjoy the race. And for many of us, I think we're so tired that we're just simply enduring life as opposed to enjoying life. And Roxanne, listen to the statistic that I was reading in preparation for the show, that 72% of Americans right now feel tired.
Oh,
Emotionally,
absolutely.
physically, spiritually tired. And let us just ask you a question. Do you feel like your life is a little bit out of balance? Like, would you say that you are living the life that in the exact same way that God would have intended for you to live? Or would you say that you too, just like those statistics, are tired, exhausted, just feel like you're running from one thing to the next?
I mean, really, that's what we're struggling with, and no one is immune to the stress that comes from living in this world. And many of us don't even realize how much we are affected by going, too long without any source of renewal. Most of us, as you were speaking about, are moving from task to task, but we're not really checking in with how we're doing as we move through those tasks. And stress signals aren't always obvious, right? They are the persistent headache, mild, that comes on at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, once a week or daily. It's the physical exhaustion we feel in trying to get ourselves to do the next thing that we don't want to do. It's trouble sleeping, waking up in the middle of the night, not being able to go back to sleep. It's irritability, in a short fuse. Research has shown that one of the strongest signals of stress is irritability. Lack of motivation or desire. We don't feel like doing really just about anything other than, crashing on the couch. And then, in worse situations, we have destructive habits that really seem to seep in when we're in a state of stress. But I think where it really affects families is the lack of presence we have with those around us. On an exercise wheel, going from one thing to the next, we really don't see the people that God has placed right before us to care for and to love and to connect with. And if we aren't careful, this can deplete our families, wear us down, really deplete us of our reserves, and affect our relationships in very divisive ways. It can affect the way we feel about ourselves and ultimately our vision and our purpose, because we have nothing left to give toward His calling on our life.
You're listening to Healthy Minds, Healthy Souls, and tonight we are talking about catching our breath. And I don't know about all of you, but this show is dedicated to the people that are out there that just feel like their life is just so busy that they just seem to be running from one thing to the next. We invite you to join the conversation tonight by calling in at 1-855-237-2346. Maybe just share with us really how you feel like you're just running from one thing to the next, or maybe even some ways that you've kind of coped with this busyness of life that we're all experiencing. You can also email us a question at ask@ancientfaith.com. And there's already many people that are tuning in online. And so we thank you for tuning in online through both our church's social media platforms as well as Ancient Faith. So please, if you have a question or comment, feel free to insert those in the comment line. Roxanne, I read this quote right before the show that I thought was just so appropriate. And I can definitely relate to this, and I'm sure you too as well. It says, if you're burning the candle at both ends, you're not that bright. And I think if we're truly being honest with ourselves, I think all of us can check that box and say, you know what? We have found ourselves burning the candle at both ends. And in many ways, over time, we're not that bright. We lose that. And so I just want to kind of share with our audience and our listeners, really, what are some unhealthy consequences that come about when we're running too hard and when we can't catch our breath? So number one, I shared this in a sermon that I gave this past Sunday, but this was one of the comments that I shared at that sermon that I felt was just something that was on my heart, and I'd heard so many people struggling with this, is that when we are tired, number one, is that the risk of making sinful choices increase. That's extraordinary. In other words, when we are tired, not only physically, emotionally, and spiritually, it cascades into every part of our life. And Roxanne beautifully said that earlier, we can become impatient, we get angry quickly. And what I like to always tell people is, and it might not be the most appropriate English, but I always say that the devil will always speak the loudest in your life when you are the tiredest in your life. Let me say that again. The devil will always speak the loudest in your life when you are the tiredest in your life. Like when you are tired, your resistance level is lower. You can't discern correctly what's right, what's wrong. When you're tired, you will see yourself and you will compromise on your morals and values. You'll do things that you would never have thought that you would do. Why? Because you're tired. And it's interesting how what Jesus speaks about in the Gospel of Luke, chapter 21, verses 34. This is a verse I'd ask you to write down. It's Luke 21, verses 34. And listen to what Jesus says. He says, "Be careful, or your hearts will be weighed down with dissipation, drunkenness, and the anxieties of life. And that day will close in on you like a trap." Notice that your hearts are weighed down. So it's not just the number of activities that you are doing, but it is what those activities are actually doing to your heart.
I mean, absolutely. We don't attend to our body and our soul it is compromised because it's housed in turmoil, right? And so it is sort of contained in this, armor, this vehicle that we're supposed to be using to deliver its goodness to the world, but it is completely compromised when we don't care for our bodies and our minds. Our soul is housed in turmoil.
And, and I think in that one of the words that he uses when he's cautioning all of us is he says, be weighed down with dissipation. And dissipation literally means like a slow evaporation, like it's little by little. It's just kind of sucking the life out of us. And he's warning us, be careful. And I love, like, during our divine liturgy, in the Orthodox Church's divine liturgy is so beautiful, where we say, that the priest says this inaudible prayer, but I love to share it, with our audience tonight, Roxanne, is that when it says, we who mystically represent the cherubim, we're representing the cherubim, this angel, we're representing this angel, and it says, and as we're singing this thrice holy hymn, that the hymn that they're singing as we're preparing to go for the great entrance, and it says this amazing statement, let us then lay aside all the cares and the worries of this life, so that invisibly, so that we can live out our lives in the way in which Christ wants us to do. And so I just want to caution all of us that when we are tired, we will sin more. Here's another area that I think that another consequence of running too hard, running that race too far and not taking a break, not catching your breath. Number 2 is that my emotions become inconsistent. You have to know that, in your own life, when you're tired, and I used this example recently that, I'm so guilty of this, that, if I'm hungry and I'm tired, there's a word for all this that many of you know, it's called hangry. You're hungry and you're tired, which equals getting angry, and you get to be impatient. And again, when you are tired, when you haven't caught your breath, when you haven't really slowed down your life to look around what's going on in your life, is when your emotions could be so inconsistent. And again, if you notice when you're on the way to work, or if you're driving on the car, and if you've ever noticed that whenever you are late, you will be much more impatient on the road. Why? Because you're tired.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And the interesting thing is that our thinking, next time you feel this way, pay attention, because our thinking tends to reflect our mood of the time, right? So the way we will interpret a situation has to do with how rested we feel in that moment. It's the same reason why we give the benefit of the doubt to somebody in one situation when we're rested and our needs are met. And then the same thing happens next week and we find ourselves just fueled with anger. And so our thinking is most compromised when we are overwhelmed or stressed or have gone too long without that renewal. And so it's really interesting to watch how your thoughts will follow your mood, and then vice versa. Your thoughts can also create the mood. There's a dynamic back and forth that's very interesting to pay attention to. And really in doing so, in studying your thoughts, one of the most beautiful things that God equipped us with was that neurologically it's protective. It decreases the intensity of the emotion. When we can label our feelings and identify what's wrong and put words on it, we actually create space between us and the feelings we're having. So neurologically, it's a bit protective to begin identifying it and sort of studying what you're thinking about, because it really takes away the fuel that was creating all of that ruckus within your soul.
In Roxanne, there's a beautiful Bible verse that I'd love for our listeners to write down. It's taken from the book of Job, chapter 9, verses 25. And listen to what it says. It says, my days go by faster than a runner, and then they fly away without me seeing any joy. I love that. Many of us are just running so fast, so just doing so much to doing, and then all we're running, and at the end, we don't see any joy. And for many of us, we are so focused on the destination, the goals that we have to do, the to-do list, that we're not enjoying the journey that God gives us. It's not always about the destination. It is really enjoying the journey. And anytime you're in a fast-paced life, you will have less joy. Slower paced means more joy. Another area that we feel that we wrote down are some areas that just basically are areas that we can truthfully become tired and have negative consequences to us physically, emotionally, and spiritually, is when you're in a hurried lifestyle, you are less productive. And this is where I think a huge myth, Roxanne, that so many people kind of buy into, is that they feel like that the more that they do, it is a reflection of just how productive they are. You know, we've kind of bought into this lie that, and I was using this example recently, that you know, no one goes around and says, I've got nothing to do. I'm just kind of sitting around doing nothing, putting my feet up. I mean, it is so much part of our culture that to be doing something, that if we're doing nothing, it is almost emblematic of, or almost a judgment that we're not being productive.
What's incredible is how backed that is by research.
Right.
That as many people as we are that multitask, the fascinating thing is that when they've put people under functional MRI, they see that when we are doing more than one task at a time, we become less efficient, we become careless, we make mistakes, and ultimately we become less productive. And so we were not actually designed for multitasking.
Right.
You know, you look at the Bible and how much it speaks about being present and being still. And so much of that is hardwired into the design of humanity. We were not meant to be living as fast-paced a life as we are living today.
You're listening to Healthy Minds, Healthy Souls. We're so excited that you're joining us this evening. We are talking about catching our breath and just talking about how busy we are and how we need to slow down. And we're just at the beginning part of this show, we're just basically sharing with you some consequences, some things that will take place in our life so that you are aware, because when we are tired, we will make some choices and will reflect in ways that God never intended us to do. So we encourage you to join the conversation tonight. You can call in right now at 1-855-237-2346. That's 1-855-237-2346. You can also email us during the recording of this live show at ask@ancientfaith.com. That's ask@ancientfaith.com. So we've shared already 3 areas that are going to be compromised when we are tired. That the risk for sinful choices increases. That our emotions become inconsistent, and that, to be honest with you, a great myth is broken that when we are tired, we are actually less productive, that this hurried lifestyle creates us a less productive lifestyle. And another area that we did, number 4, would be that when you're oftentimes tired, or when you're just kind of going from one thing, running this race, you'll oftentimes feel empty inside. And I don't know, Roxanne, I think that's just an area that I think so many people, feel, and they kind of sometimes label this as burnout. And I always kind of caution people to be very careful in using the word burnout, because burnout really comes from doing things that really have no purpose. They don't bring you any joy. In other words, it comes as a consequence of doing things over and over that really don't bring you any excitement. It's almost like in a mathematical formula. It's like activity minus purpose will equal a burnout. And so I encourage all of you to realize that sometimes we're just running so fast that we're doing things that, to be honest with you, don't bring us any joy, and we just kind of feel blah.
Right. And not everything that we say is important is actually important. And I see that coming up in the chat room, where Despina saying, can you address the need for multitasking and how much we are trying to do at the same time, which makes us burnt out, but really we have to be more intentional, because the world is going to say more is better and better is best. And that is the world we live in with our children. Really, and it's interesting because there's this whole notion of helicopter parents now. And, it's interesting how helicopter parents were born, and they were born out of these unrealistic demands that were then now placed on children who were never meant to be thrown into competition the way they've been thrown into a cutthroat world where scores just keep going up and up and up, seats become less and less. And so, the birth of helicopter parents really came out of this sort of unrealistic culture of more is better and better is best. And so what we're seeing is, we have to, as human beings, as parents, as individuals, decide actively what is important to have on my calendar. What can I say no to? Because really everything that seems important is not necessarily a task that needs our attention.
Right. Psalm 39:6 is a great Bible verse for this particular area. It says, that we are merely moving shadows, and all our busy rushings ends in nothing. In other words, we're just keep going and keep going. All of it's just merely a shadow. And so how important it is that to make sure that we're doing things that lead to our purpose, that fulfill the purpose that God has for our life. Here's another one that we want to just kind of share with you, and that is that when we're living a rushed life, we can't hear God. And I know that, Roxanne, we do a lot of shows and a lot of talks and retreats on this topic of simply hearing God. And for so many people, oftentimes use this example, and we definitely use it in our book, Renewing You, is that, God every day yearns to communicate to us. He loves to just knock at the door of our heart. And oftentimes when he comes and knocks at the door of our hearts, there's no one home. Why? Because we're so busy doing so many other tasks, so many other things. Another analogy is to think of it like a phone call, that God every day is wanting to make a phone call to you. He wants to be part of your life. But when he calls you, the line is always busy because we're busy doing everything else. And again, we don't want to give the notion that we shouldn't be goal-oriented, that we should not have tasks that we want to accomplish. Of course, God yearns for us. He puts those dreams on the inside of us. But it should not come at a cost where we don't enjoy the journey. That everything should not just simply be about the destination. It should be about enjoying the journey all along the way. And that's why the Bible always tells us that, I love this in Psalm 46:10. It says, be still, and know that I'm God. In other words, we can't know God unless we're truly still. And in the Orthodox Church, we mean that in the sense that we really can't spend time with him and connect with him and truly hear him unless we're in a season or in a moment of silence. That's why the church fathers speak so greatly about silence and being in that moment of silence. And Jesus modeled that in his own life.
Absolutely.
Countless times he was going
just
around.
Say that. Yeah. How often on our pilgrimage to Jerusalem did we see, the tour guide reminding us, and here Jesus walked outside the walls of the city. Here's the mountain that he stayed on, all night. Here's the long river that he walked alongside by himself in solitude, even away at times from his disciples, even away from the conversation, and that he would retreat. And of course, we have the story of the greatest retreat when he went into the wilderness for 40 days, after his baptism in preparation for his ministry. I mean, what solitude he sought in order to hear his voice. And I can't imagine that world was as busy as the world we live in now. I mean, maybe it was, but being digital, natives here, and many adolescents being online all day, they didn't even have the cell phone back then. Now we have sort of this added dimension that separates us. Even in our moments where we pull up to a stoplight, we now have a distraction. Even when we ride on an airplane, we now have a distraction. There is no built-in time anymore to pause and hear the convictions, hear the perspectives, because those are all the knocks on the heart, right? Those are the things we hear when we're still.
Exactly. And tonight, friends, we're just trying to give you some words of encouragement about catching your breath, and just especially during this season that we've been dealing with the COVID pandemic, but really even prior to this, we were all struggling with this desire to go from one job to the next, to just run another race, to keep running a little bit further, to check that final email, to answer that phone call, to try to get that last assignment complete. And again, yes, there's beauty in doing and having tasks to be assigned, but what we're seeing in our life is that it is coming at a cost. And what we've been sharing with you are just 5 areas, basically 5 areas that will be impacted when we are tired. And so we encourage you, join the conversation by calling in at 1-855-237-2346. That's 1-855-237-2346. We also thank those of you that are sharing your comments, your beautiful comments on our social media platforms, whether it be at Ancient Faith or here at the Lows. Sharing comments. I hope that the show is beneficial to you, and we encourage you to ask questions as well. And then I think, Roxanne, as I was just kind of shifting from really, what are the consequences of us just being tired and how it truly impacts us, I think it's so important also to kind of share just a beautiful Bible verse that comes from the Gospel of Mark, chapter 6, verses 31. Hopefully this verse will speak to you. It says this. It says, "Then because so many people were coming and going, that they did not even have a chance to eat," they're referring to Christ and his disciples didn't have time to eat, "he said to them, 'Come with me by yourselves to a quiet place, and let's get some rest.'" Come with me by yourselves to a quiet place, and let's get some rest. And I think all of us, what we're hoping that this show will provide for you is just a moment of rest in your life. We're going to take a quick break. On the other end of this break, we're going to share with you just some basic principles that you can apply in your life. So get out a pen and a paper about how you can insert some time to slow the pace and enjoy all of God's grace. We'll be right back.
Healthy Minds, Healthy Souls with Father Nick and Dr. Roxanne Lowe will be back in a moment. Give them a call at 855-237-2346. That's 855-237-AF Radio. They would love to hear from you.
Are you struggling in your walk with Christ? Do you want to rediscover your reason for living, the person you were created to be? Renewing You, a priest, a psychologist, and a plan gives you the keys to unlock areas of your life that hold you back from fully experiencing the renewal and transformation God has in mind for you. Co-authored by a priest and a psychologist, Father Nicholas and Dr. Roxanne Lowe, Renewing You combines principles of spiritual growth with psychological tools to help you become your best self, fully connected with God's purpose for you. To purchase this book, please go to store.ancientfaith.com. That's store.ancientfaith.com.
We're back with Healthy Minds, Healthy Souls and Father Nick and Dr. Roxanne Lowe. You have a question for the Lowe's? Call in now at 855-237-2346. That's 855-237-AF Radio. Here once again is Father Nick and Dr. Roxanne Lowe.
Well, welcome back to Healthy Minds, Healthy Souls. My name is Father Nicholas Lowe, and I'm joined by my lovely wife and co-host, Dr. Roxanne Lowe, a clinical psychologist right here in the city of Jacksonville. We're talking about a topic that I think all of us can relate to, and that's just kind of catching our breath, just slowing down. We invite you to call in tonight at 1-855-237-2346. That's 1-855-237-2346. You can also email us a question or a comment at ask@ancientfaith.com. That's ask@ancientfaith.com. And we also encourage you to continue those beautiful comments that we see on our social media platforms, whether it be at Ancient Faith Radio on Facebook or on the Lowe's Facebook page. We love seeing all those encouraging messages, and we're so glad that this message is speaking to so many of you. We have a caller that came in, and so Despina, are you there?
Hi, how are you?
Hey, great, Despina. How are you doing?
Hey, Despina.
First off, happy anniversary. I don't know what year your show was in because I lost count, but I remember it started in January, and I've been listening to it for several years now, so congratulations on another great year.
Thank you
That's
so much.
so thoughtful. Thank you.
I wanted to call in because one of the things that, when I saw that the theme was catching our breath, one of the things I've been thinking about is how I'm just having a lot of online fatigue. And so for example, we were talking about a fundraiser for a charity this year, and normally it's in person, but this year they're like, oh, we're going to do it virtually. And I was like, oh no, another online event. And then I'll give you another example. My friend is having her birthday, and she's like, oh, I'm throwing a party on Zoom. And I'm like, another online event. Can't we just meet in person? So there's like a balance between wanting to connect with people socially, but also like not being by the computer all the time. Do you have any, and it seems like it's not going away anytime soon, right? So do you have any advice for that? How can we combat this, this pandemic fatigue, this online fatigue? How do we reset ourselves in that respect while still being able to connect with others?
So it's interesting that you bring that up, because that has been probably over the last 6 months something that we've heard a lot of is Zoom fatigue. There is the lingo for it now at this point. And really what we're finding is that it is less engaging when there are so many people online. The social cues are not there for who's going to chime in. Whereas if you're sitting in a room full of people, it's a little bit more organic and natural. And so you know how you fit into the fullness of the group, and you have a sense of belonging and purpose, and you add to it and you gain something from it. And so what we're seeing in Zoom fatigue is really a lack of knowing how to engage, when to engage. There's less of a read on social cues. And so there's sort of an awkwardness about existing in this sort of imaginary techie place. And people are finding that it's less rewarding in terms of connection. So if it's something, you have to do, or you're going to gain something because it was very engaging, you were brought in from the beginning, it was a smaller group. We find that people are more likely to participate in activities virtually who are engaged right from the beginning, and it's a smaller group, and there isn't this sort of awkwardness of the sense of belonging.
Yeah, and I would just kind of add to what Roxanne was sharing, Despina, and that is that, it's so important that, some of the reasons that we have that fatigue are not really within our hands. I mean, we don't really have a choice. For a lot of us, it's work. I mean, I know in our church, we're doing men's Bible studies, women's Bible studies. We're doing our own family Bible studies every single week. And so, these are things that we offer, and people get tired. And so I think one of the keys is making sure that you're almost inserting time where there is a break from you literally being in front of any type of screen, whether it be a television, whether it be a computer screen, and just simply being still, whether that means just to go into the kitchen and maybe, make some coffee or go for a walk or just a time or a moment to kind of just catch your breath, because just not to mention the sensory overload that's taking place when we're just visually looking at a computer screen for long periods of time, as well as a television. But the fact that for many of us, it's something that is not really bringing us much joy and happiness. So that stillness, God has created us really to yearn for that stillness. And we think, oftentimes we kind of buy into what the world tells us, that we know we don't need to be still, that if we're still, that we're not being productive. It's a sign of being unproductive, actually. But what God is saying is to purposefully insert time to where you're just simply not looking at any screen, and simply just maybe either being in a moment of prayer, going for a walk, playing with your dog, or whatever, if you have an animal, or just taking time to simply do something totally outside of that realm. I think I find that to be, for myself, very helpful as well.
That's a great idea. I think that's something that will kind of brighten up this sense of tiredness that everyone's feeling,
Exactly.
Yeah, it is so tiring on the eyes. It's funny that you mentioned that earlier. I mean, there is so much on dry eyes right now because of that. And you think about how distracted people are when they are on Zoom. They're not fully present either. They're half the time checking emails and everything else. So that also complicates it. It's difficult.
It's difficult to do that. And but thank you, Despina, for that question and your comments. Yes, ma'am.
Can I sneak in one more question?
Absolutely.
With you. So my other question is, it has to do with the time of the year, because now that we're post-Christmas and it's, January, it's still dark early, and where I am in the Northeast, it's very cold, and there's nothing really to do. There's no Broadway, there's no movies, there's no ice skating, there's no nothing. And so this sense of kind of gloom sets in, and like, oh, what is there to look forward to? And even today I was like, oh, when does Lent start? That's going to be exciting and fun, because so do you guys have any advice about what to do when it just seems like there's nothing really going on? You know what I mean? Like there's no, this sense of excitement or anticipation is just gone. And now it's like, oh, okay, well, we'll have to wait for the summer, and hopefully we can go out a little bit more. You know what I mean?
It's tough. I think, just to normalize that, Despina, there's so many people across our country now that the natural built-in protections from all of our gloom and internal angst have been removed from us in a lot of ways. So I do think there's a sort of a natural, almost organic reaction that we're having. The feelings make sense. But, we do probably need to be a little more intentional about, finding sources of renewal that adapt to this, because it is sort of a little bit longer in the making than we were all assuming it was going to be. And maybe new hobbies, new interests that are more COVID friendly. Maybe pick up that one book that you've been eyeing for weeks that, or maybe months or maybe a year that you haven't read, beginning something anew. I know a lot of people who've taken up just new habits that kind of moved their soul. And so it's sort of a way to adapt to the normalcy that I think everyone is feeling. I don't think we could feel anything else in the state of our country right now.
And one of the things too that I love is, God has given us this beauty, and you know this already, Despina, because you've been part of our show for all these years, and you've heard us talk about this. But we were created to be givers. We are giving people, and one of the great things that I've encouraged people that have come to confession with me is I oftentimes tell them, turn that almost the despair into something productive. In other words, don't allow the burden of this time to keep you from being a blessing to someone else. And so I love writing cards. And I think that if every week you were to maybe write some cards to your colleagues, just saying, hey, listen, it could be something as silly as, I was on a show the other day and I was talking to some friends of mine that host a show, and we were talking about catching our breath, and I just want to give you a word of encouragement that God loves you. Transitioning that negativity, because our bodies, and the Bible tells us this, that our minds will naturally gravitate towards the negative. Well, that's very important to remember. We will naturally, without a pandemic, naturally gravitate in January and February. In fact, studies show there are more suicides and there are more funerals in the month of January than in any other month throughout the entire year because of this season. It's just a time, it's just a very dark time. And so because of that, I would just always say, look, I'm not going to allow this burden to keep me from being the blessing that God has called me to do. Being open and honest, I know, Roxanne, we wrote our book. I mean, we were able to finish our book, I should say, because of the pandemic. It forced us to kind of put something beautiful together in Renewing You in the months of January, February, March of last year. It forced us to do something because we weren't going anywhere. The churches were all closed down. We would do liturgies on Sunday, but everything was at home. So we really used that time. And I'm not saying that we have everything right or that we've done it perfectly, but I will tell you that it was extremely therapeutic for us to write the book during that time. We had been putting it together, obviously, over the last several years, but really having that opportunity to kind of codify it and put it together was really, I think, beneficial for us. And so maybe it's you writing, like journaling, what's kind of going on. I mean, what we are going through as a society, this is historical times, guys. I mean, what we are experiencing, people 50 years, 100 years from now will be talking about the pandemic of 2020.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's funny you should mention that, because I bought your book over Christmas, and then I didn't have time to read over Christmas, but I just picked it up for January, and I was so excited. I was like, oh, this is great. This totally fits in with January. So funny you should mention that. That's actually great. Yeah. Thanks so much. These are great ideas. I'm really excited. Yeah.
Thanks, Despina.
Thank you, Despina. Thank you so much. You too. God bless you, hon. Thank you. And again, the book that we came up, that we wrote is Renewing You, a priest, a psychologist, and a plan. And we encourage you, if you're looking for some renewal in your life, we encourage you you can find it right here at Ancient Faith. And hopefully it's an inspiration. All of the proceeds from this book, as we've mentioned many, many times in the past, are all going to make a difference in outreach ministries that are very important to us, especially at St. John the Divine. I want to share with you a Bible verse. I want you to write this verse down. It's something that speaks to me. I shared it this past week in my sermon. Jesus says this, and I just love what it says because it just speaks to me, and I know hopefully it will speak to you as well. But he says, "Come to me, all of you who are tired and you are burdened." And listen to what it says. It says, "And I will give you rest." And I think for so many of us right now, we can become compromised when we are tired, and we will find everything else except him to give us rest. And he's telling us, come to me, all of you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. And he says, take my yoke upon you and learn from me. And the word yoke, you all know this, is an instrument that farmers would use that would basically have two oxen would be fitting into this yoke, and they would just plow a straight line. And what he was saying is that basically, whatever you're connected to is what's going to lead your life. It's going to be the plowing your life. And what he's saying is that for many of us, we are yoked to our work. We are yoked to this responsibility, this obligation. And what he's saying is, no, take my yoke. Take my yoke. And then I love it. It says, and you will find rest for your souls. I love that. Matthew chapter 11, verses 28 to 30. So then really, what are the ways? Roxanne, I think we can kind of share with all of our listeners, really, what are the ways that we can all stop and catch our breath? And we've written down a couple of these for you. We hope that these will be helpful. So if you have a pen and paper, you might want to write these down. But number one is, and we talked about this earlier, Roxanne, you beautifully shared this as always. It says, stop for the constant push for more. And I think so often we wear like this badge of honor around ourselves that says, I'm busy. It's almost like this is some sort of great goal that we all want to have. And again, as we've talked about, yes, it's great to be, to have goals and accomplishments. But for many of us, we are buying into this lie that more is better. Do you know that the average American spends 137% of their income? Why? Because there's a need for more. It's just a crazy thing that we have bought into. It's also the same way in our own work life, where we're constantly just working and working and working. And I oftentimes tell people, and I mean this in the most respectful way, but many people are trying to make a living, but they're not making a life. In the book of Proverbs, chapter 14, verses 30 says this. It says, a heart at peace gives life to the body, but envy rots the bones. A heart at peace gives life to the body, but envy rots the bones. And I think so for so many of us, we need that peace because we're just trying to keep up with the Joneses, trying to keep up with our responsibilities. And for many of us, we're just tired. We need that break.
And I think that involves, as the show is called, taking a breath, right? When we're chasing the more is better, really, we have to make time to just breathe. Mm-hmm. In God's design, when we breathe deeply, we actually activate our vagus nerve, which acts opposite to our fight-flight reaction. So this is powerful. Deep breathing isn't just something that, people thought about, long ago as a good idea. No, it actually activates a nerve that acts opposite to your fight-flight reaction. So regular deep breathing and slowing down and taking a breath can reduce your blood pressure and instantaneously help you de-stress and reset. And remember that exhale being long and steady is more important than the inhale. That's the part that sort of, activates relaxation. So in this constant push for more, pause amidst your day and take a breath. And try to think about putting yourself back on your own radar. We have to contain our tendency to overschedule by refocusing some of our attention back on our own needs. This isn't selfish, right? Remember that, committing to life-giving practices is what fuels our soul to go out and do good and to do more. And so we have to carve out time to reset and check in with ourselves and decide what we need and what's going to fuel us best in that moment.
You're listening to Healthy Minds, Healthy Souls, and we are speaking tonight about catching our breath, just taking time to just slow down and look around all the God's graces that he blesses us with. We're talking, and we hope that we're just kind of giving you some practical tools that you can apply in your everyday life about how to catch your breath. And so we encourage you to join the conversation. You can call in at 1-855-237-2346. That's 1-855-237-2346. You can also email us a question at ask@ancientfaith.com, or you can send us a question or comment through the social media platforms at Ancient Faith Radio or at ours at the Lows. And I do want to just tell our listeners that you can find out a lot more about this particular subject of catching our breath. It's chapter 5 in our brand new book, Renewing You. And so if you haven't picked it up, definitely do so. The number 2, if number 1 is stop the constant push for more, then we would say that number 2 is the third commandment. It is keeping the Sabbath day holy. And I think that is so important because for many of us, what we don't realize is that it's called a Sabbath day, not a Sabbath hour. And sometimes we're just taking an hour and a half to spend time with God on a Sunday morning, and that's beautiful. And God knows that we love having you in church. But what God is truly asking for is to have a day. You know what the word Sabbath means? It means to stop, to cease. And God is saying, make that day a holy day. In the book of Exodus, it says this, you have 6 days to do work, but the 7th day is a day of rest dedicated to me. Let me ask you,
That's beautiful.
Really, what is the day that you have for the Lord? Other than on a Sunday morning liturgy or a Sunday morning prayer service, when are you spending time with God? And one of the keys that we have to know is that we can't hear God if we're not spending time with God and keeping that day holy and honoring that. And so we encourage you on that day Take time to pick up your Bible, to spend time more in prayer, to read a daily devotional, but just take time to truly spend it the way God wants us to, with our family and with Him.
Absolutely. And I really think the idea of just stopping, right? As you were talking about, pausing and resting without an agenda. Mm-hmm. How hard is that to do? You know, as soon as people sit down, that's when the mind comes on and it sort of starts going through everything it needs to do. So really trying to redirect your mind to not having an agenda. If something comes to you, write it down. You can do it later. You know, if something comes to you, it's burdening you, write it down. You can do it later. But really, that gap in your week where everything stops and you disconnect from all work and work-related activities to just exist, it is when we can hear His voice, especially when you start it with the devotion, a Bible reading. Sit time, spend time with your children reading or your spouse reading, pray together. This is a beautiful time to sort of relaunch your week with Him at the forefront.
I love that. So remember also what the Bible says in the book of Proverbs. It says, reverence to God will add hours to your day. I love that. Just spending time with it. We don't know necessarily if it's chronological hours to our day, but it is allowing ourselves to live a life that's more filled with joy, the joy that only comes by being with Him. So if number one is stop the constant push for more, number two is keep the Sabbath day holy, we would say number three is focus on what matters most. And Roxanne mentioned this earlier in the show. Not everything that we think matters. I think many of us have bought in again to this lie that the world kind of tells us that everything in our life should matter, that everything that we think that comes across our mind truly matters. It doesn't. So what does? What does matter? And let me just share with you just a couple things that I hope we could spend a long time on this one topic alone, but let me give you some areas that I think do matter, things that I do think that we need to spend time with, and that is that our purpose matters. We are not on this earth simply as some random act in history. God has put us on this earth on purpose for a great purpose. You have a purpose, and in each one of us, God has given us a gift that is unique to us, and what He yearns more than anything is that we would unwrap that gift and fan that flame by making a difference in this world, by using the gifts that God has given us to make this world a better place. Another thing that matters, obviously, is our soul matters. I think spending time with God and truly understanding, is my life in alignment with God? A couple questions I would always ask you to ask yourself is, what would God tell me to start doing that I'm not doing now? What would He tell me to start doing that I'm not doing now? And what would He tell me to stop doing that I am doing now? In other words, simply assessing my soul. And in the scriptures, and especially during Lent, we will hear this over and over again about how the soul oftentimes is found sleeping. We just kind of get into this monotony of life that, yes, our soul may be alive in the sense that we're kind of journeying through life, but we're not awake. And how the Bible and in our hymns of our church during Lent say, awake my soul. And finally, I would say that what matters most is our family. In the end of your days, your job is not going to keep you company, but your family will. And what I want to encourage you with is take time every day to enjoy your family. Listen, I've been a priest now for over 13 years, and never at a funeral or never at someone's actual deathbed do I ever hear someone say, you know, Father Nick, I need to check that email, or I need to answer that last phone call, or I need to go and finish up this last deal. No, what they want more than anything is to spend time with their family, to get things right. So I encourage you to do that. Don't spend so much time with your children that all you're doing is raising them. Spend time enjoying them.
I mean, absolutely. And I think this does require some reflection, right? To really take in those moments of pausing, to take a moment to reflect on parts of your life where you are not feeling at peace. Mm-hmm. Things that do feel like, after I did this, I really felt it drained my soul. It wasn't life-giving. And I think those are moments of awareness that God places on our hearts so that we can redirect what we do moving forward. Mm-hmm. So take that time to reflect and to decide.
And finally, we would say number 4 would be is get close to Christ. I love Psalm 23, and many of you have heard this many, many times before, but just a couple of verses of it that I just think are so beautiful, and that is, it says, "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not be in want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside quiet waters." I love that. I think so often what happens is that when we make Christ our shepherd, and just so you know, everyone, is that there is a shepherd leading you, whether it's your shepherd is your work, whether it's your social media, whether it's something that you have to do. Everyone has a shepherd, and what this prayer that David talks about is dedicating his life, saying that you, Lord, are my shepherd, and he talks about not only him being the shepherd, but what happens when he is your shepherd. He makes me lie down. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me. And so I just want to encourage you also that if you're looking to restore your soul, that maybe we all need to get a little bit closer to Christ, to get close to him, and to allow him, as he says earlier, "Come to me and I will give you rest," that we would spend time with him.
Absolutely. I mean, even, the scripture, I love the scripture that says, we know his voice. The sheep know his voice because they're used to spending time with him, right? So getting to know him, getting closer to him, that's how we know his voice. Otherwise, we're trying to discern voices all day long, and we're not sure what's passing through our mind. Is this from God, or is this from the world? Is this my flesh or my spirit? We've got a quick call coming in. I know we're at the last few minutes of the show. So if she's still on the line, we're going to try to grab that call.
Otherwise, we're trying to discern voices all day.
Hello?
We're not sure what's passing through our mind.
Hello. Welcome to the show.
Oh, is this Presbytera?
Yes, you might. It's Presbytera. You might want to turn
Lee.
down your radio.
Oh, well, let me.
Or your.
How can I do it? Let me see. I'll put it on the side here.
I hear my voice in the background there.
And I just wanted to add, Roxanne, that to what you said about keeping busy. I live alone now, and I keep busy by playing games, word games. It keeps my mind going. I love it. It challenges me. And the most important thing my family, of course, they call and they come. But the most important thing I want to tell you is when I feel low or I feel blue, something happens. Something funny happens, or I don't want to say funny, but strange. All of a sudden the phone rings and I have a call from a distant relative, a nephew or a niece or a friend. And it seems every time I'm at my lowest, it seems I get a phone call. And then I think, God works in mysterious ways. And when I'm done,
Yes, he
I'm
does.
always feeling so much better. But this happens quite often to me, and I think it's a wonderful thing. But I do keep busy by reading, and I do like to play word games that challenge my mind. And my grandson, Alex, signed me up with a book company in New York, and I was writing my life story. And I gave it up about a month ago, and he's been after me to finish. And I went back to read some of the things because I didn't think I could write very well. And I was amazed at what I wrote.
Beautiful.
I said,
That
I
is
could
beautiful.
write. I didn't realize I could write. And now I'm starting up again. And
Thank you.
I've gone through. I had a good life. We had hard times. I didn't experience it too well because I was the last of 7 children, and I was more protected than the rest. But they were so good, all of my family, and I had a lot of experiences in Pennsylvania in a steel town. Then I went to Saratoga Springs, but I'm not going to keep you long because I called too late. But I just want to say that how God is great.
Thank you, Lee, so much for calling in, and we love you and just love having you in our church, and your comments are so, I know, needed for everyone, so thank you so much.
Thank you.
I love the church, and I worked hard for the church, and I wish I could do it again, but I can't.
Amen. Well, you've done a lot, and you're in our thoughts and our prayers, and God willing, once we're past this COVID pandemic, that we'll all be back together. So thank you again, Lee. And we also, just as we're closing out,
your card, your beautiful card for me. I appreciate it very much.
My pleasure.
Love you both.
Thank you.
Thank you. And so as we're kind of closing out the show, I just wanted to kind of just remind you of the things that we want to just encourage you to do, the things that you can apply today in your life to kind of slow down the race of life. And number one is stop the constant push for more. Keep the Sabbath day holy. Get close to Christ and focus on what matters most: my purpose, my soul, and my family. These are things that we hope that what we've shared with you this evening can kind of just give you just some encouragement in your life, because the reality is, friends, is that that at some point we will go back to some semblance of normalcy. But do we really want to go back to the old normal, where we were always just as busy as we are now, where we were struggling to find things and felt like we were just simply running from one race to the next? No, let's seek some renewal. Let's seek some renewal and make a pledge this year that we're going to slow down the pace of our life to enjoy all of God's grace. As we're closing out the show, I just want to once again invite all of you to join. If you are a married couple or considering getting married in any time in the near future, we are, Ancient Faith has asked Roxanne and I to do a retreat. It's called Renewing Your Marriage Retreat. It is something that we have already, I think, Roxanne, the latest numbers have, I think, over 200 or 300 people already present for this retreat. It's a large retreat so far, and we encourage you, I think, there's still space for those of you that would like to register for it. You can do so. Let me tell you how you can do it. Let me give you a number to call. You can call at 1-800-967-7377. This is 1-800-967-7377. It is going to be on Saturday, February 13th, just the day before Valentine's Day. So it's just an opportunity for us all to be together. I promise you that when you come to this retreat, I think Roxanne and I have already been kind of putting this together. Hopefully it'll be an area where it can help your marriage go to a level that you never thought possible. And Roxanne, any final parting thoughts that you want to share with our listeners tonight?
Take a moment to take a breath and sit in a moment of stillness before you listen into the next podcast. Thanks for being with us tonight.
Thank you so much to Matushka Trudy for being behind the scenes and making sure that everything went so well as the producer of this show. We wish you all a blessed day. God bless you all, and stay strong in your walk of faith.